I'm already recording. Okay. Hi, it's me again. Obviously, I'm just gonna keep recording these because I'm afraid if I wait to gauge the response, I will not keep going. So I'm just gonna take you through another poem in Yolk, the publication of poems that I recently produced with Bottle Cap Press. If you haven't already, please go purchase for $3.50 for a digital download or $10 for the real print shebang. But in this video, I just wanted to take you a bit behind the shell, as I like to say. And yeah, tell you a bit about the poems from my perspective, what they meant to me in writing them, and hopefully that can give you a bit more insight into how you might perceive them and make your own meaning of them. So in the last video, I talked a bit about Rock Collection, which is one of the oldest poems in this collection. But for this one, I wanted to talk about a duo. This might be a little bit of a longer video, but I wanted to talk about... There's multiple poems in this collection that kind of go together, or they're like partner poems in some ways. There's like antecedent, and then... Oh god, I don't know what the opposite of antecedent is. Postcedent? There's like the precursor and then like the cursor. I don't know how to say it, but like there's a lot of poems that are like kind of have share symbolisms or share analogies, and I kind of wanted to describe a few of those because I think understanding both of them together can help you understand each one separately. So I'm going to describe Crane Cries and To Kill a Spider, which you can see here on page 15 and page 20. Both of these poems, oh, sorry. Okay, so we're going to start with Crane Cries. This, oh god. Okay, we're gonna start with Crane Cries. This poem, this poem, and the one that I'm gonna describe next, To Kill a Spider, both are talking about the internal dilemma that I face whenever a bug presents itself in my bedroom. Um, I, as an overthinker, tend to apply a lot of guilt in these scenarios. I think about it in a very deep way. um, because, especially as I'm describing in this poem, I'm talking about it's spring. It's spring. We've gotten through a long, hard winter, and we're just starting to open up our windows and like invite the outside into our lives again. And in that process, we bring in bugs and like these unwanted specimens into our worlds. And I have such guilt with that because it's like, oh, you're inviting the outside into your life, and then into your room, and then you're getting, it's kind of like dark, and then you kill, and then you trap, and then you kill the things that enter inside. It's like so twisted when you think about it that way, of like, oh, I opened myself up to the world, and then I just used it as like a sadistic trap to just like trap and kill anything that comes in. So I started to feel such guilt with that when like all of these crane flies started, presenting themselves in my room. Of course, the best thing would have been to like bring them outside, but they're really hard to catch, and yeah, they're really hard to catch, and they're quite big and kind of scary. And so for a while, I kind of just decided to coexist with them for a bit. And this poem talks about like that process of like, okay, we're just coexisting for a bit. Like we're startling each other in the bathroom. We're fighting for space to rest. Like, it just seemed like too awful to kill this thing that I let come into my house. And so to cope with that, I tried a number of both passive and active methods of dealing with these flies. I talk about, sucking them up into thick, clear containments, which was me like taking my handy vac and like sucking them up into my vacuum, which was like so sad because then you just see them like jumping around inside of the vacuum. And that started to make me think about how like my house is kind of like this thick, clear containment. I've got these like big windows and walls in my house, and like how I'm kind of just like the fly that's like stuck inside of this thick, clear containment. And so that line is also kind of meant to talk about like both me sucking them up with the handy vac, but also, thinking about us both just like inhaling and exhaling inside of this like trap, I guess, this trap of a home. I glazed eyes at bulbs burning, flickering feet, watched shadows dance behind soft screens till fainted screams fell silent. This is like the line that in so many poetry workshops, like I would like lose people at. They're like, I don't understand what you mean by that. And like, fair enough. To me, it's super clear because I was there in the moment. But this again describes two things at once. And this kind of like is the purpose of this part in the poem, where I shift from just observing the fly to then realizing that I'm also kind of observing myself in a way, or like how observing the fly prompts me to observe myself and like consider myself in the same way and like put myself in its shoes. So similar to like the thick, clear containments, I'm also talking about like the more passive way of dealing with the flies, which was like just watching them die, essentially. Like there was a few of them that became really like infatuated with my lamp. And so here I'm describing the process of me just like zoning out to watching the flies like dance on top of the light bulb behind the shade until they die, essentially. Which was like really morbid and sad. But I'm also at the same time, like as I was watching the flies, dance behind soft screens till fainted screams fell silent, I'm also describing out my window, looking into my neighbor's window, and, I was able to see, the shadows of their family, eating dinner or like doing whatever they're doing at night. But just like behind the curtain, I could see their shadow with, I could see their shadows, and like faintly hear their voices, if not imagining it, until, night comes and they turn off their lights and they go to sleep. So I'm kind of drawing that analogy, at least in my own mind, of like watching people behind screens, dance until they die, at least for the night. And then the same thing with the bugs, watching them dance behind the screen of the lamp until they die. So I'm like drawing these parallels, these super dark parallels of like humans and bugs both being trapped inside houses until they die. And that becomes very clear in the final stanza when I say like one settled behind the curtain above the window I settled behind, to prompt that thought of like, oh shit, we're both trapped in here. Like, oh, we're both trapped in here. It's not just the bug. Like, I'm also just sitting here, like watching life happen. And, talking about how like, this spidery thing with the tiny little wings, if it had bigger wings, I would use them myself and I would fly out of this place, because if it had bigger wings, it would be out of this John. And if I had bigger wings, if I had a bolder sense of self, I wouldn't be sitting in this house right now when it's so beautiful outside. I'd be out in the world too. But instead, we're both just sitting here behind this wall, and we're regretting that we ever trusted the world enough to enter into this place. And, because it was all to our own demise, essentially. Jeez, these are such dark poems, and I am sorry for that. It's just the way my mind tends to work, especially with these concepts of like, you know, nature and like our place in nature and how we create these cages for ourselves, you know, like so much of our lives can act like restrictions imposed on ourselves. And, you know, for me, this was written during a time when I was working remotely in my house and the days were long and dark and, or short, I guess. They were short and dark, and I was just envious of these insects that could fly around the world without having any conscience. And this is kind of my first poem in the collection, just kind of like grappling with that kind of like simplicity of nature and the complication of being human, and how that can lead to like real dissatisfaction. And then just to continue that same notion is To Kill a Spider. I won't spend so much time talking about this one, hopefully, but it pulls on the same dilemma, of like the guilt of having a spider in your room, and you know, you create this forced companionship because I'm too afraid to make a decision about how to kill it. And in that process of like debating how to kill this being, I start to contemplate, okay, well, like, why does it deserve to die and I deserve to live? You know, like, what is its meaning compared to mine? And then through having that spiral of thoughts, I start to grow envious of the spider and how simple it is and how it doesn't have to question these deep things, and it doesn't have to feel the pain of living. It only has to feel the pain of death. And that kind of drove me insane for a bit until it drove me insane enough to finally leave my house and leave my room and go to the beach. And that's the end of this poem, is like the only place that I can feel gratitude for my consciousness and gratitude for my humanity is when I am deeply in nature, and when I'm deeply embedded in something much larger than myself, because then I am just as much a victim to the elements as everything around me. You know, I'm the same as an ant. I am the same as a grain of sand. And that like humbling experience can really like bring me back to earth, really. It brings me back to earth, out of my mind, and just into space, and the space and nature that we share with other living beings, and we're all the same victims of the world in that way. And yeah, so it's kind of like the same exact dilemma that I describe here, just in a bit darker of a way. And yeah, I don't know if there's like anything else to say here, really. This one's more about like, the other one's more concerned with like being trapped inside, and this one's more concerned with like the questions of, you know, what different types of beings deserve based on their consciousness, I guess, and like what it means to be. It used to be titled To Be Conscious, but when I had it titled as that, some people in my poetry workshop thought I was talking about being in an abusive relationship, because only in the title as I have it now do I actually explicitly say that I'm talking about a spider. So before I had mention of the spider, it seemed like I was talking about living with this abusive companion and like trying to figure out how to escape this really ruthless, unthinking companion that I felt like such like trepidation around. And while that was interesting to entertain, I decided that I really wanted people to know I was talking about a spider, because I think knowing the rudimentariness of like the question of like to kill a spider, how like pointless that kind of seems to most people, I thought that was like really important to know, as opposed to thinking that I was in an abusive relationship and talking about another human, and I think that kind of gets away from the real point of the poem as being something that you contemplate, you know, the value of consciousness in a way. So yeah, those are some two flirty, cute little poems from Yolk. I think in like explaining these poems, it becomes really clear how intense this collection is. You know, it can seem lighthearted because it's coming of age and because it's, you know, they were written when I was younger, and you know, they're about kind of, I guess, silly kind of things like rocks and spiders, and but I think in describing them, it really grounds you in how intense intense they are, and I hopefully that doesn't like turn people away. I think if anything, I hope that it invites people to read a bit more deeply into them, and like really feel these feelings with me of like what it means to be human and what it means to grow up and like start to ponder these really intense questions. So yeah, if you haven't already, go purchase Yolk at Bottle Cap Press, and stay tuned for my next little explainer video. Peace.